let's look a little bit on, you've been mentioning partnership, and this is like the big segment that I want to spend some time on.
Finally.
Yeah, right. Let's back up a little bit, right? Let's do this from perspective of somebody that doesn't even know what this is. So, like, what does a partnership manager do, or like a head of partnerships do? Like, tell me about that first.
Oh yeah, it's a difficult one, and it's also one of the things that made it really, really fun for me over the years, because my job is, I've had the same title for 6 years. I've been the head of partnerships, and before, like when I started the role, I had the head of partnerships, which might not be accurate to do in hindsight. But it's been a different job every single year, which has been part of the fun.
Right.
For me, it's about orchestrating the team, setting the plan for the team, helping my team, coach the team, set the vision, put the strategies, optimize and set the structures, work a lot with internal stakeholders to pave the way for my team and for the partners that we're building relationships with to actually succeed. That's most of my job, what I'm doing right now, is like internal puzzling in a sense. Like, how do I get sales to do this? How do I get them engaged? How do I make these sales managers work with us? And how do I understand what's in it for them? And how do I make my team aligned? And how do I make sure that they are going towards the same path, but not in the same path? That's where my job is now. When I started out, it was about me trying to understand, what do we need as for partnerships at Teamtailor? Because partnerships is, I think that's one of the things that makes it difficult, because it's such a big word that could encompass so many different things.
Yeah, of course.
And partnerships to any individual company can mean so many different things. And especially if you add verticals and industries and that to it as well. If you're thinking brand partnerships, which an agency has with a TikTok or an influencer, that's partnerships, but it's very different from the partnerships we do at Teamtailor. If you're thinking partnership, you could be thinking Volkswagen selling their cars through a dealer, which is a partnerships and their resellers. Like 75% of all trade goes through indirect sales by not the manufacturer building it themselves. They're selling it through effectively a partnership.
Right.
And me understanding like what is needed for Teamtailor was one of the biggest learnings I had to understand. Like, how do we make partnerships that help us get to the goal that we wanted to do? So that was my first learnings that I had to learn, both the hard way and the fun way when I started out doing it.
And I think this is so interesting. Like you didn't have any traditional partnership training before you did this, right?
No.
Was there anyone at the company who had done partnerships in any way?
No.
So, like, when you were doing this, did you have anyone that you could talk to about this? Like, were there any, I don't know, like mentors? Like, even if you didn't know them on a personal level, were there anyone doing it like online or anything like that you could learn from? Or
there were a few that I could some extent, like there was a small partnership community in Sweden that I started speaking to. They were all as green as I was, so we were trying to learn things together. Like, hey, I tried this. I'm like, oh, did that work? No, it didn't. Okay, I'm not going to try it. But I also quickly came to realize that it was a recent thing in Sweden, but it's a much more established way of working in North America. So when I was able to get in contact with some of these people who had been doing it for 6 years or 10 years in SaaS companies in North America, that gave me a lot of insights about how do we do things. But it's also been really fun to be able to pave the way of how we do things in Sweden.
Right.
Because when I started doing it, not a lot of companies in SaaS were investing in partnerships. When I got the question about, do you want to do partnerships? My first question was like, what's partnerships? And I literally had to spend a year trying to pave this jungle. Okay, I'm Googling how to do partnerships. And all the articles I found were like, here's how you build a reseller program like your Toyota. Or here's how you build a brand partnership like your Facebook or this influencer.
Right.
And I had to filter all that and find a few gems here and there. Like, okay, we need to build a partnership like this. And then that led me to be able to connect to some of these people that did it in the US, where I could have a Zoom call and just reach out or just type to them on LinkedIn, listen to a podcast, where I could get portions of it. But I also think that that's one of the thing that is the most tricky for new partnership managers, that it's so difficult to know what you need to filter out. Versus what you need to listen to.
Right.
And I did the same thing. I just absorbed everything and tried to implement everything, and it didn't work. And now I know that's not relevant for me, so I'm not even going to read it.
Right.
But there are certain things that I see that from new people that I speak to, that they're seeing this grand vision of this. This is how you do it. And it's like, but that's not relevant for you because they're in a different vertical, different space, different ICP, different company. And I think that's what makes a lot of people struggle doing partnership and not succeed at first, because it is very different.
True. No, that makes sense. And I think as you're speaking about it now, you're also coming from a perspective where you've done a lot of the mistakes, you've done it for a long time, but it's always interesting to hear when somebody is embarking on like a new journey, and trying to learn something new, and especially when it's coming from a company perspective, because as a, let's say, like if you're a non-profit company, then this doesn't matter as much. But if you're a company that's looking for profit, starting new initiatives usually tends to get scrutinized and sort of questioned when they're not bringing in what they initially were meant to bring in. So I wanted to ask you, once you hopped on the opportunity to start partnerships at Teamtailor, how did you feel the internal support were, and how did that change throughout the journey?
So like when I started doing partnerships, like our CEO had a person that or an agency or something that he has been spoken about that gave us some referrals. And that's the path where I like started doing something. This was basically an affiliate referral program that's the foundation that we had. But since I was first of all trying to figure out what we needed to do, I couldn't go out too much and communicate, which meant I couldn't start building the internal stakeholder alignment as quickly as I needed to, because I had to do the learning experience and figure out what do I actually need first.
Right.
I went on every single opportunity just trying to learn, because I saw every opportunity like this might be good, this might not be good.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people who promised the world and I didn't get anything.
Yeah.
But there was also a few that like I had no expectations going in that turned out to be really, really solid partnerships that gave me some learnings. But the difficulty with me the first years was, number one, I was trying to figure out what the strategy was and what to do. Teamtailor was at that point a very sales driven, like sales. That's how we grew. We didn't do marketing. We didn't do paid. We didn't do like sales. It's sales.
Right.
So I had to find a way to be supportive of sales without stepping on their toes and doing something that could contradict that, because that was and still is our growth avenue.
Right.
And I think that's something that set me back a few years. And in hindsight, I'm grateful for, because I've learned a lot for it. But since I had to tackle both of them at once, I chose to understand partnerships for obvious reasons, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do my job.
Right.
That led me to not building the internal alignment as quickly as I needed to, which made it more difficult once I actually understood what I needed to do. And I needed to get some of the people on board that I'd been working for a year doing partnerships, and they hadn't seen me, or when they've seen me, I had said something that wasn't relevant to them. And so I had to rebuild the trust and rebuild and start working like, how do I work with these people to get them to understand and work with me on this?
Right. That makes sense, of course. And I think that is similar with, I think, any type of new initiative. And I think it's a super great reflection to hear when it comes to that, like doing the stakeholders management and the internal stakeholders management, of course, because even though this was something that came from your CEO, as you said, but still, like it's easy for a CEO to throw out new initiatives. That's what they do pretty much all of the time, right?
Yeah. No, but like in hindsight, like I think I'm grateful because I got the opportunity and I got the patience to go out and really learn as long as that's one of the things that has made me so happy about the journey I've had and made me stick around for so long. Because when I got the opportunity to do partnerships, that was 2 years in.
Right.
That's 5 years that I've stayed longer. And it's partly because of the patience, and they saw that, hey, there's something here. We're not seeing the results yet, but there might be something. And that's partly me, partly external and partly internal from other avenues. But the fact that I was given that patience, and I was took it as like, I need to learn, I need to get there to as soon as possible. And without that letting it slack. Me coming from a sales background meant that I could still do some sales and still carry my own weight to some extent while learning.
Interesting.
But it's grateful for it now, because it's allowed me to. I was forced to grow. I was put into a position where like, you need to grow here, otherwise you're not going to make it.
Right.
And that's upscaled my learning curve and the way I had to grow quite quickly, which has put me in a very grateful position today.
Nice. And want to get back to like you're saying that I still did some sales. Tell me about the early stages of this. Like I'm getting the sense that you weren't focusing on partnerships full time at the beginning.
I was to some extent, but I was still doing all of the sales with the opportunities that I got from the partnerships team. So I was getting this partner to recommend us in one way, shape, or form, or doing something with this partner that generated some opportunities. But I was also the person trying to close the deals.
Got you.
So like I still held up some of the costs in a sense, and still brought in revenue while still building up the pipeline and understanding what are the ideal partners that we need to have a Teamtailor for it to be scalable.
I understand. Do you think having a sales background is critical for having success in a partnership role?
Not necessarily. I think it really varies depending on company. I think a Teamtailor, I think it was, especially at that stage, I think it was crucial. Depending on the company, it's partnerships means different things. Like the purpose and the goal of you trying to do partnership varies. For some companies, a marketing background is way better. For some, a customer success background is way better. And for some, like us, sales is way better. It depends on what is the purpose of the partnership. A lot of them are sales and just like growth driven, but they might also be doing better managed by somebody doing marketing at scale and that kind of stuff. So, but for us and for me at that point, it was helpful.
Yeah, got you. Very interesting. I have so many more questions on this topic. Then if we've covered like, okay, so what is partnership, right? And then I want to understand more, like you told us about when it started, but I want to understand more of why you decided to even try a partnership strategy. What was the initiative like?
I remember it really clearly because I was thinking about it. I was doing well in sales. I was one of the top performing salespeople in the company and did well, made money, and had a promising career in sales. But I stood up and thought to myself, like, I could continue this path, make more money and just do that, but I will plateau in terms of learning and development. And my thoughts, I remember it vividly. It was like, if I look back on my life when I'm 50, which path do I think I will prefer that I took? The safe one where I know is something, or the one that I think I can grow? And I took the one where I thought I could grow because that would put me in a better position when I'm 50 and when I look back at my life.
Interesting.
That was my sole decision making.
Interesting. And it also sounds like you're giving a little hint to the 50-year-olds out there. You're saying that life is over at 50?
No, but that was just me at that point. I think that's,
I'm joking with you, man. No, just a joke. Don't worry about it. I wanted also to understand, that's your personal reason to why you wanted to do partnerships, right? And I love the fact that you chose that route. From a company perspective, what would you say was the same why? What was the reason why you started partnerships in general? Like, what made you start the partnership strategy? Because you could have easily chosen to say, hey, you're doing good in sales, let's keep you in sales, right? So what do you think that started?
I think I was involved with these partners a lot. We had like a few or two partners that we had some kind of partnerships with, and I was working with these people, and the CEO was managing these relationships, and I was working with them. So I was like the only person who had actually worked with these partners from a sales perspective. In Sweden. But we also, at that time, we started getting traction in the US, and a large portion of that was because of partnerships. So we started seeing, as a company standpoint, this is actually, I haven't even asked our CEO why the exact reason, but if I think about it, in the beginning of 2018, when I started doing partnerships, our growth actually started happening in the UK, and I was speaking to our country manager of the UK, and a large portion of that was because they found some agencies that were able to make the first opportunities, create the first like traction for us, and then the snowball effect could start. And he literally struggled for a year, like couldn't get through the door, and then he got through with a partner, and this partner opened up the first opportunity, and as soon as they had the first one, they could start the snowball effect. So then they saw that. I think they wanted to invest in, because they saw that it was an enabler that allowed them to actually like crack the egg open in the UK. And from there, it grew quite quickly in the UK.
And when you, sorry to interrupt you, but when you're mentioning agencies, what type of agencies are you talking about?
So for us, that was like recruitment agencies, so like recruitment consultancies and agencies. And then like at Teamtailor, just to give some context, we have three core pillars of partnerships. It's technology partnerships, so integration partnerships of any type that adds some additional value. It's professional services, which is mainly like marketing agencies and recruitment agencies. And then we have like venture and community space, so like we're incubators and venture capital firms and things like that. So those are like our three core pillars.
Talk me through about those three, because the first one, technology, like just give me an example of what that could be.
I think that's what the most interesting one, and where I struggle the most, because it has so many things you can apply to it. And I think it varies depending on your business, how attached you are to the creator ecosystem. There are certain companies who their sole product is connecting data between two products in one way, shape, or form. They're going to be super dependent on that ecosystem that they're involved in. As an ATS, we were super dependent because our customer were using HR system, they were using assessment platforms, they were using e-signature platforms, and that kind of stuff. So for us, we needed to work with those from initially an enablement standpoint. We can't sell to these customers unless we have that integration in place and that partnership with that provider.
Okay.
Because the customers are requesting it, and if we go to this partner and they will start recommending somebody else, we will lose that deal. So we need to build strong allies with the greater ecosystem that's already in play.
Gotcha.
But it also adds so many multiples of layers where you have they're generally larger in terms of headcount and following. So it's a great angle from marketing standpoint. They have a lot of people following them. They tend to be larger. They have larger sales teams. So they're oftentimes a great opportunity to generate referrals and new opportunities. They're great from customer standpoint, customer success standpoint. They reduce stickiness, increase stickiness, reduce churn, improve customer satisfaction. And for us, it's like a value added proposition. Teamtailor does this. If a customer asks to do something else, we have partners that allows us to do that.
Right.
So I think it's the most complex one, but also the most fun one, because there's so many different layers to it, which add so much value depending on the company. And I also think you need to be careful about the position your company is in, because for us, it makes sense to really invest in that, because we are in the center of our ecosystem. But there are companies who aren't really in that space where it doesn't make as much sense, and there are better avenues for them to pursue.
Okay, got you. And I think, as you said, that's also why I wanted to know more about that, because I think that's the one that's most interesting, because I think that the second one you mentioned with the agencies is quite self-explanatory.
It's more self-explanatory.
Yeah, and the other one, which I think is also nice, which the incubator, the startup community, and so on. But I think in that sense, so it's more of maybe you give. Tell me about that. So let me not start by.
No, but for us, it's we want to be able to give back to companies that allow them to continue growing, and in our way, it's twofold. It allows us to help the next generation of companies build the foundation that they need to recruit their talent. And hopefully that leads to great things. We've seen some great results historically where we've signed a startup, and this startup turned out to be a unicorn, which is great for our branding and marketing and that kind of stuff.
Of course.
But it's also just such a way for us to give back and to give opportunities. Plus, it's a nice opportunity because these companies want their companies, portfolio companies and membership companies, to grow. It benefits everybody. So it's a low effort in sense. But really high impactful in multiple ways.
Of course.
And for us, professional services is also interesting from another standpoint, which I don't think, the general one is they will recommend us and sell our products. But we also have a lot of our customers who are asking us for hey, we don't know how to conduct interviews properly. I don't know, or need help setting up our employer branding campaigns or recruitment marketing campaigns and that kind of stuff. And we can help them by guiding them to hey, this person is an expert at this. So it goes full circle, which increases our customer stickiness and satisfaction and that kind of stuff as well.
So in that case, maybe you become the referrer as opposed to them being
as well. In both ways, we preferably we want it to be partnerships in its core needs to be mutually beneficial.
Of course.
And the best partnerships are mutually beneficial 3 ways. So it's beneficial for the partner, the company, and the customer.
Yeah, gotcha. For sure. Definitely. That makes sense. I want to know more about how you structure the plan for acquiring new partners. And I want to, because to me, sometimes it's so maybe it's similar to, and that's why I wanted to carefully use the word acquiring. As you said, it needs to be beneficial for all the parts, right? All the people involved in that partnership. But to me, sometimes I think about it from a sales perspective. Okay, you got these target accounts, you got these are a good fit, and then these are top 1, top 2, or top 3, and so on, or tier 1, tier 2, whatever you want to name it as. Is it similar to that, or would you say it's a different approach when it comes to structuring a plan for acquiring new customers and structuring a plan for acquiring new partners?
No, but I think it is very similar. But I think people forget about the managing the customer part. Because most of the people doing the acquiring of partners, it is very similar to the sales process. You need to convince somebody to work with you. but that's generally the easy part. Whilst in sales, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
So in partnerships, the real work starts once you've acquired the partnerships.
Right.
In general, that's when you like the customer success management and getting them engaged and understanding how you work together and understanding how you collaborate and what's in it for them, what's in it for us, how do we work together. The complexity starts once the contract is signed.
Right.
Whilst from people who have sales background and experience, it's usually like the complexity is getting the customer to sign and then you're done.
Yeah, or to even talk to you sometimes.
Yeah. Whilst partnerships, it's much more generally easier. Of course, depends on markets and things like that. But acquiring customer partners is generally not the most difficult part. Acquiring the right partners, that's more difficult because there's going to be a lot of companies that want to work with you, and you need to be very selective. I think that's something that took me too long than I care to admit to actually realize that in sales, you want to get as many as possible. But in partnerships, you want to get the right ones. You don't want to have 15 partners. It's better for you to have a good one.
Right.
In some circumstances.
Why is that? Like, I can understand it from a sales perspective because, of course, and that this comes down to, of course, you want volume in sales, but of course, you also want the right fit. But I understand that, of course, it's different when it comes to sales because you won't be as selective when it comes to that, as long as it's somewhat in the ICP.
No.
Tell me why you think it matters more when it comes to partnerships.
I think like the worth adding as well. If the partners are in your ideal partner profile, you want 15 as well. But I think you really need to understand what is your ideal partner profile. Like, what does define a good partner? What are the characteristics? What are the things that actually determines if a partner is going to be a good partner or not?
Right.
And you need to be able to assess that before you sign the partnership in some way. Which is something that comes with experience, understanding how they work, with trial and error from the past.
Right.
But the reasoning behind it is when you have a really, really solid partner, a big partner, like you want to be able to spend as much time with that partner to help scale it, work with that team. Like in an ideal world, some of our partnerships, like my goal is just facilitating the relationship between our sales team and their sales team, and just being the person moving the things around, getting things involved, like talking about the marketing strategy, the integration strategy, the sales strategy, development strategy, keeping their sales team top of mind, keeping my sales team top of mind about them. So, and if you have 15 partners that all want your attention, you can't go as in depth and you can't build the really, really strong relationships and really understand each other at its core, which is why it's much better to do quality over quantity, at least initially. Once you have that nailed down, you can start going for a more quantitative approach.
Of course. Yeah, that makes sense. Tell me more about what does it look like day to day? Tell me about, and I know, of course, this differs a lot from when you started and it was only you, or maybe you and a few people, and then now. And talk me through this from, like, I'd say preferably, because we're going to come back to you, preferably from like a partner manager, maybe someone in your team. Like, what does their day-to-day life look like?
Yeah, I think my day-to-day looks very different from theirs. My day-to-day is solving their problems and trying to find ways to make them more effective and work with internal stakeholders, like if we're summarizing it.
Yeah.
Their day-to-day is generally like, okay, how do I phrase this? Like, to keep it simple, say that a partnership manager Teamtailor has a portfolio of 50 partners that they should manage. Some of these ones are strategic partners, some of them are less strategic, and some of them are not strategic.
Right.
They need to balance their act of making sure that they meet these internal stakeholders or do something that adds value to them in terms of content or like engagement or relationship building or some sorts.
Right.
But they also need to spend time building the relationship with the salespeople that are actually going to be promoting them or working with the referrals from that partner and things like that.
Right.
So it's a dual stake where they need to be building relationships with the sales team and they need to be building relationships with the partners.
Right.
And like the ideal is like, how do you spend as much time on that? I think a partnership manager at Teamtailor, their day-to-day will vary a lot depending on the maturity of their market and the maturity of their region.
Yeah.
A partnership manager who's been around, who has a full portfolio, they will spend the vast majority of their time working with the existing partners or the existing sales team and thinking about how do I plan for the next quarter and 6 months to make sure that we can grow as much and generate as much revenue and get the goals that we want to do. Whilst a new person needs to go out and find the right partners to actually do that while not missing out on the existing ones.
Yeah.
So it varies a lot, but it's a lot of traditional sales in that sense, where you need to go out and find people. You're meeting with a lot of internal people, and you're project managing the relationships and the plans of how do you work together with this external company.
Yeah. And so I'm hearing, as you said before, also like a lot of similarities to sales. But I want to understand more. So you guys, when you look at your direct reports, so do you typically look at, well, then, for example, I don't know, how many new partners are you bringing in? Is that one of the metrics maybe, or are you looking at how much revenue is the partner bringing into Teamtailor and so on? Like, what are some of the metrics that you look at? Because we know what we look at traditionally from salespeople, and I want to know what kind of metrics do we look at from partner managers.
So for us, there's to really go like quick fire. Like all of the different partnership programs have the same metrics, where it's like revenue is one of our key metrics, and the
revenue coming in
from that individual partners. Okay. So the partners are classified based on their revenue historically.
Okay.
But there's also attributes like activations in terms of integrations, or SQLs they're sending, or cases that they work with us, or the percentage of their client base that are using Teamtailor, things like that. Okay. So it's not just solely sales, depending on the partner.
Right.
The partnerships team will, of course, look at these partners, and revenue is a key piece of that. But I need to also make sure that they're meeting these partners and they're planning out these things, and they're working about, if they don't have their portfolio in place, or they have like a portfolio that isn't well balanced, they need to work on getting that portfolio well balanced, or get partners in place.
Yeah.
So I will then look at how many new partners are they meeting and how many new partners are they signing.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not about them like, well, with me that I signed 15. They need to sign the right people, because otherwise they're just wasting their time.
Right.
And for existing ones, it's more about, okay, how much are they working with the internal stakeholders in terms of those projects? What things are they doing internally to help boost internal alignment? Yeah. How much are they meeting their existing partners, and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So for me, it's more like those meeting KPIs, and of course the end results. I'm more like oriented on like results rather than input. Like output rather than input.
Yeah, no, I got you. That makes sense. But you're also hearing the partner managers. They both manage existing partners and also acquire new ones. So they got to balance that, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And I want to know more about, how does it actually look like? I'm talking about, and you don't need to go into any specific details about like the figures or anything like that, but you're mentioning the best scenarios are when there's a win for you, there's a win for the customer, and then there's a win for the partner, right? What are some of those wins? Of course, we've mentioned one win for you, which is revenue, of course.
Of course.
Talk a little bit about that, and also talk about other types of wins. What are those?
I think there's so many different answers to that question. I think for us, if we look at it from a sales perspective, these referrals that we're getting from these partners, they're more likely to close, they're larger, they have a higher win rate, and they have a higher customer satisfaction. And that's partly because when they come to us, somebody's already convinced them, and somebody they already trust has already told them that, hey, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Which means there's less fight and less defensiveness from the salespeople.
True.
The same principle applies if you're getting recommended by a close friend of yours.
True.
But it comes down to the trust and who the person recommended. So we look at those numbers, and those are key from a sales perspective, of course. Then we have like the impact and marketing relation, like activities that we're doing. If we're doing a webinar solo, or if we're doing a webinar with a partner, we're getting much more traction generally on partner related ones, because we're not the only ones driving traffic to it.
Right. Of course.
So that's a value. And then, like from the partner standpoint, there's so many layers to it. So I think you need to be more specific. But there's so many different things that you could look into that could add value. And I think that's one of the things that, as partnership manager, you need to do, is you need to know how to prove that value.
No, that makes sense, and I love the way you phrase that. Of course, I understand it's big, but let me try and be more specific then, because when it comes to, and I know you mentioned the 3 different partner. Did you call them partner programs or partner verticals?
Yeah.
Like, for example, when it comes to the expectations from your partners, for example, would you say, if you focus on, for example, the technology vendors, what are some of the main expectations that they have from you as a partner? And maybe that differs a lot too, but I'm sure that there's a few that are reoccurring, right?
Of course, like we always try to start all partnerships by trying to understand what's in it for them. Yeah. There's certain partners who want to work with us because we are the top dog in the market and we are the big player in that market. Yeah. There are certain players who want to work with us because they can't sell their product effectively without having an integration or a relationship with us.
Yeah.
There are certain players who know that when they recommend us, that reflects well on them. That by recommending us, that allows them to sell their product, or that means that their customers will be more likely to be happier with their product. And for us, when we start these partnerships, we can't make assumptions, because there might be 5 partners in the same vertical, in the same category. They're all CRMs, but they have different things that they're looking from us. So we always need to try to assess, like, what is the specific thing that they are looking for?
Right.
Is it that they will use us as a selling tool? Is it that they will use us as an enablement tool, as a marketing tool, things like that?
Right.
And that helps us dictate as well, like, how much do we spend and how much that fit our strategy.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So I think it's very, you shouldn't make assumptions. It's probably the one which I think it's easy to make when you see a company that is similar to their competitor and you're working with both, but these guys might have very different things that actually makes them tick.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sure. Tell me then about, as you said, you were already talking about some of the challenges, which is, managing expectations and not assuming stuff. But what has been some of the, I don't know, maybe biggest challenges, and still are some of the biggest challenges into building a partnership strategy?
I think the biggest one is that you can't do it alone. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. Yeah. You're reliant, especially in the way we do partnerships. Yeah. Like, there are partnership strategies that you can do as a one-man show, and you don't need your sales team or marketing team or whatever. Yeah. But the way we do partnerships, we're reliant on our relationship with the marketing team, the product team, the finance team, the sales team, in order for us to actually get the results. So we need to get alignment and understand what is there, like what's in it for them to get them involved. It also oftentimes means that we need to be trying to drive a change, and it's a change management exercise in many different ways, in addition to the high targets. And you need to try to convince management to understand, hey, I need to convince salespeople to start doing things differently, which is oftentimes a difficult sell. Right. And I need to convince salespeople to always ask this question. There's 15 dogs that are too old to learn how to sit, but I need to teach them how to sit. Right. That is one of the difficult things, and you need to make sure they get the alignment from the management and that kind of stuff as well.
Meaning the partner that you work with. So I'm hearing like you spend a lot of time educating them, of course, on the product and how to sell it. Of course, I can imagine how to manage, I don't know, objections and so on. So you're basically training them into how to present Teamtailor in a way that you would like to, basically.
This question is more about the internal struggles from the internal team. How do I get my internal sales team to do it? And of course, they have the same principles from the external team, but then the complexities become even more difficult because you can't control what they're doing, because they're a different company with different entities, and you just need to make it as easy as possible for them to understand and for them to like you as much, so that they're willing to do it. And
because they're already thinking, like, I've already been sort of trained by my boss here, and he or she holds 40 minutes every week to train us, and then why am I going to listen to this new guy or girl, whatever?
I think one of the most fascinating things about me is the psychology behind it. About you trying to understand like from the psychology standpoint, what makes this person want to do this, right? And how you can drive that change from an external stakeholder without forcing them and telling them what to do. Yeah. What are the incentives and motivators and the structures I can set in place from a psychology standpoint that allows this person to want to work with me? Yeah. And to set that into a foundation, and how do I build that change internally and externally? Yeah. That is by far the biggest challenge. Yeah. But it's also one of those things that once you have it in place, and once you have that trust, and when you're working with a partner that already gets it, it's so much easier. Because then you can start doing it. But I think it's also something you tend to forget, because you just, I'm done, I'll leave it and move on to the next one. Well, you need to continuously do it, because if you stop doing it for 6 months, then everybody will just go back to their old habits.
Yeah. Do you think every tech company should work with the partnership strategy? If yes, why? If no, why?
I think every company should do it, because I think there are benefits. I think, but you need to work with different types of partnerships. There's not a one-size-fits-all strategy, which is more where I was aligning to, where some companies will just be like, okay, I can't live without the partnership strategy. It's core to the way we do business. Like if I'm a platform that is solely dependent on Salesforce and HubSpot in the CRM space, like it needs to be core, because you can't survive without the partnerships with those products. And then you might be a freestanding company, and your partnership strategy might be brand awareness, marketing, or something else, and value add. But I think it's something that every company has a really good value from, because it is so compounding. It's usually like a person that can have such an impact that it helps multiple levels of the business. But I also think you need to be really careful, and you need to be aware of why you're doing things and not just doing it because everybody else is doing it or because somebody told you to do it.
Right.
You need to understand what is the goal I'm trying to achieve with this partnership strategy.
Right.
I think that's the number one thing that a lot of companies gets wrong.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that every company definitely should do.
Yeah. Got you. It makes sense. And following up on that, and I told you earlier on, like there's some things about this that I think is interesting. I'm a CMO here at Business With, so partnership tends to be very close to my area. But I want to know, and I know this is also going to be a difficult question, but we got a little bit of time, so let's try to break it down.
Let's do it.
What advice would you give to companies who are looking to incorporate like a partnership strategy into their go-to-market overall strategy? Like starting with the partnership strategy.
Number one, understand your goal. Like what is your goal and what is the desired outcome? And like what are the partial desired outcomes? Like you will have a guiding star, that's where I want to be, but what are achievable goals that I can reach somewhere in the near future?
Yeah.
Once you have that, understand what is the partner profile that helps you get to that point.
Is it like an ICP typically?
In a sense, you need to understand, okay, who can help me get to that point? Is that a marketing agency? Is that an influencer? Is that a technology company? Is that a VC firm? Like it's dependent on that goal. A lot of companies will have revenue and it's going to be easier for you to do some of those paths. But I think it's important that you actually do the lesson to do that initially. Once you know that, you need to understand the why. Like what's in it for them?
Yeah.
Because it's really easy for you. Like, okay, this is my clear-cut goal, but if that clear-cut goal isn't aligned to their why, or if there's no natural way of making it happen, you're never going to make it work. And it doesn't have to be the same thing. Like it's easy if you and them both want leads from each other, like that's doable. But it could also be that they want to incorporate you into their marketing campaigns and you want to get leads from them. If they can't make that happen in a natural way where they're forced to go out of their way to make it work for you, you're going to struggle. So the best partnerships are when their interests are aligned in a natural way. So it's already part of the way they're doing things, or it's not too big of a step away from the way they're already doing things. But if you're forcing them or telling them, hey, I need you to work entirely different so you can align to my goals, so I can align to your goals, it's going to fall flat.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really important that you do that lesson and try to do that as much as possible and be humble and ask. Like, what's your goals? What's your goals? Once you have a few partners that fit that criteria, ask all of them, because they might also give you different answers.
Right.
And you might be able to understand, okay, what am I going to do there?
Yeah.
From there, you can start building it.
Right.
But I think it's also from that on, depending on your team and depending on your goals, you also need to start understanding what's in it for the internal team.
Yeah.
Because like
internal
I said,
team at your own company or
okay. And I think that's one of the things. But I think you touched on something that I think is also really important to mention. But that's like very deep level. But I think it's worth mentioning and so that you're aware of it. But a lot of companies will also be very reliant on your internal team. Like you might have the marketing team doing a lot of the campaigns. You might have an integration team or a development team doing some of the integrations. If that's part of your strategy, you might have a sales team running all of the opportunities and leads. And you might have a finance team that needs to be okay with some of those things.
Right.
You need to understand what's in it for them and how do I make that work, and just not have to fix everything, but you need to be aware of it.
Right.
But on your topic there as well, something that you mentioned, which is really key to understand as well, is understanding the alignment from all of the stakeholders from your partners.
Right.
Because you might come to an agreement with a company, and this is great for the company, but it doesn't help the person doing the job.
Okay.
Which is a super common pitch trap where on paper, this partnership is great, but the stakeholders doing the job that will actually make this partnership happen doesn't see any benefit of them spending 10 hours doing this. It's great for the company, but it's not great for the people doing it.
Yeah, because the partnership kind of relationship is not set up in a way that it benefits the person that is actually doing the job, but it benefits the company. That makes perfect sense. Can you affect that in any way?
You can. And I think you also need to be aware of like what are the actions and tactics you need to do depending on that. I think a common one that you see is like, okay, you have built the best product that is like the best value added proposition to Teamtailor. All of our Teamtailor customers would love using that and would increase all of that kind of stuff. But that doesn't help any of our sales reps. It doesn't help any of the people from the partnership team to meet their KPIs. So you need to understand what can I give them that helps them do that, and do I just ignore speaking to the stakeholders? And is there a way for me to work without that stakeholder, because there might be another stakeholder that is really aligned with that.
Yeah.
So instead of you having a partnership with the partnership manager, you might need to be able to be like, okay, I want to have a partnership with your customer success team, which is an easier sell. It sounds easier than it is, because
I think
you want to have control.
Pretty much everything you mentioned here, I think, is easier said than done.
Yeah, but I think that's the principle, that you also need to be aware of that, because there's so many companies that go with that motion where, like, on paper it's great for the company and the CEO will love it, but the CEO or the board will never be the ones actually making it happen.
Yeah.
And then you have 100 salespeople who's like, why should I spend 5 hours a week doing this when I could be spending 5 hours a week doing that, which helps me get to my goals?
Yeah.
And of course, that's an internal company, like where companies, their own internal alignment is flawed, but
true.
A lot of companies have those flaws.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think, as you're saying, also, like, the more you learn, the better you can do it. But so what I'm taking away from this last part is, of course, like, okay, figuring out what's in it for me, what's in it for the company. And so I'm guessing, like, that's typically what you ask for nowadays. Like, okay, so how is the people that are actually going to do this, how are they compensated? And, like, what's the win for them, right?
Yeah.
I imagine that's something that, as you say, it's a huge learning.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of people also just quickly go on, like, well, the paying them is that's the patch that just send them a bandit and that solves everything. Right? And it's oftentimes not the actual driving factor.
What are some of the other driving factors than just compensation money-wise?
No, like for us, like I pushed that agenda really, really hard. But then I realized that generally, like, so for us as a business and for more partners businesses, the revenue that they will get and the way we've set it up is unimpactful in the greater scheme of things. So say that you have a marketing agency that is helping a global brand set up their entire recruitment marketing campaign structure. Yeah. They will recommend Teamtailor to us, which is a great brand that has tons of thousands. They will pay a really large sum. They will get a percentage of that money, which is still a drop in the ocean compared to the larger project that they're doing.
Of course.
So our goal there is like, okay, by implementing Teamtailor, how can I give you 10 more hours of that project? Because that will make you more money and make you happier. And how will I make sure that the Teamtailor implementation that you're doing as part of that project helps reflect your project and to make you more money?
Yeah.
And the commissions that they're getting, that's just like
fraction of the
total. It's a fraction of it. But it might be an incentive to help the person who brought you the project and brought the project to us.
Yeah.
But it's not the driving factor from the company and what makes them want to do it and what makes their management team and their bosses be like, hey, you need to work with Teamtailor.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense, but I also hear that this puts a lot of, this puts a lot of expectations on the person that is actually doing this job. Because when you're talking about it, this does not sound like a junior level person, maybe sometimes, but I want to ask you about this because when you're talking about, hey, you got to see what you're saying essentially is you got to see the bigger picture. You got to think long term. You got to make sure that you know what your sort of client or the person that you're talking to has on their agenda. But you also got to know what their company's agenda is in the long run and what this project means in the long run. And to me, that's not a junior person. So tell me a little bit about then when you're recruiting into a role into partnership management. That's why I asked you before. Do you think that this person needs to have a sales background, or how senior do they need to be? And I know this is relative, but talk to me a little bit about that, because doing what you just said is not easy.
No, it's not. But it's also one of those things that you can get so far by just asking. I think that's such an underlooked thing from sales, from marketing, from partnerships. Just ask. Be curious. Like, I want to know, what can we do? How can we do? You don't have to be the most senior person in the room. Just for somebody to give you the answer. Like, you don't have to figure out all the answers yourself. Ask that person, ask that person, ask that person, put them into a room. Hey, you all guys said this, how do we solve it? And you're just a facilitator of that kind of stuff. So for me, one of the things that I look for in my team is it's mostly personality. Who is the person behind it? I preferably want the person to have worked with partnerships so they understand the mentality of doing partnerships. So this isn't super foreign to them when I start speaking to them about these things. But for me, it's the person who's like, how willing is this person to grow, to roll up their sleeves, to, again, in the same way as when I said, like, they are going into a new market strategy. Like, I want my team to be able to look at this wall. It's like, it's a brick wall that I can't get through, but there's a little hole. And I want them to be the kind of people who will find that by just doing different things, trying different things, and be great people at building relationships. I have an analogy that like I started running a while back, where like when you're a partnership manager at Teamtailor specifically, you're practically like the football coach.
Okay.
So you're taken care of to be like a part of a football team. So you're the manager of the team. Your goal is to get these 11 players on the field to work together. But the complexity is that you have half of the team aren't your stakeholders. You're the partner stakeholders. So you need to teach your team how to do I make that pass? What do I need to do to make that person pass? And I want somebody to, so when I look for someone, I want somebody to have a bird's eye point of view where I can like ask them questions. Okay, how do you do this? How do I do this? So when I hire, it's a lot of like situation based for me to understand how you're thinking.
Right.
Like in this scenario, how will you deal with this? How do you deal with that kind of scenario? Because that tells me a lot of different things about their view on how they approach change and setbacks and things like that. So for me, the person behind it is the most important thing, but preferably they should have some experience so they understand the greater scheme of things.
Yeah, of course. No, that makes sense. And I totally understand that it's a plus if they come from a partnership role, and that makes sense. But I also hear that these are skills that you can acquire from other sort of fields, but there's also something that you can learn along the way.
Yes.
Coming then into the team, because it's actually a good radioövergång, as we say in Swedish. I don't know what the English word for that is, but how big is this team now? Like, tell me about the team size. How many people are you working with partnerships at Teamtailor?
So at Teamtailor, there's myself, and then there's 10 people working commercially. All of these are commercial partnership managers who work in a specific region, manage partnerships in that specific region. We chose to do it that way because that allows us to be closer to the sales, the marketing, and the partners in that region, so they understand the difference or problems that they might have in that region. Then we have a technical partnership manager who oversees all of the integration related questions. We have 2 support specialists specifically for integrations. I think we have 7 developers. So we got 7 developers working primarily specifically on partnership integrations.
Okay, nice.
Because I think we are up to like 500 integrations built or something like that. So it's super core to our business. And like when I started doing it, we had like 5. So it's and for us the first ones we started was like job boards like Indeed, Arbetsförmedlingen, and LinkedIn.
Right.
And we're still doing that as a core bracket because it's super necessary in every single market. But then we also have these other core platforms that might be more valuable in enterprise segments or different fields like that.
Right.
And that is overseen by the technology partnership manager who has a team who he plans what things are we doing with the developers and the support people to help maintain and structure that portion.
Okay, interesting. Okay, that's actually bigger than I thought. It's very interesting to learn, and especially when I'm thinking about it from the perspective of like, you know, how we're approaching it ourselves, and how I know other companies are approaching it. Tell me about the role of partnership, like your role. Are you part of the planning management team? Like, how is because to me sometimes it feels like partnerships is looked at something that just happens in the background. You're really not getting to see it at the table. People are just expecting things, but not inviting you into the greater sort of planning of the company, right? Tell me how that like looks in
I think it's been ups and downs historically. So like right now, I work very closely with the management teams for the go-to-market management team. So we've set it up in different ways of marketing, sales, and that kind of stuff. We have our core teams that we talk about the go-to-market strategies, and like I'm heavily involved there, but I'm not involved as much in like the traditional marketing team, like management team. But we don't even have a traditional management team. So Teamtailor is also run in a way that it's very different in that sense. It's a very flat organization where it's not a management team making all of those decisions. It's more like an update forum in a sense. We're like, hey, this is what's happening on our end, and we need to talk about this because I need your alignment.
Right.
So it's a very non-traditional company in the way it's run, which means it is a difficult question for me to answer in that sense. But I am working very close with all other stakeholders on all of the different ones. But I think historically it's also been very accurate to what you're saying. Like I've been sitting on the outside, be like, hey, can I come in? I'm doing all of this. This person is doing the same thing, but he's in there, but I'm not in there. Why am I not in there?
I can imagine that.
But it's also, and I think that's a common trope for a lot of people in partnerships in general, that it is a subsection of something else. It's not like the marketing team, it is the sales. It's like a bridge in the gap of some sort. There's for example, I know that there are a lot of chief marketing officers, like 17,000 chief marketing officers over the world. There are so many chief revenue officers and chief sales officers. And there's like a few hundred chief partnership officers over the world. And these are generally people who were like at Microsoft, the chief partnership officer, but I don't even think that person is in the management team. So it's usually a sub-faction, and it's on the rise, which is fun. I think it's a common trope that a lot of people in the partnerships team are doing a lot of things, but they're not getting it. And for a lot of reasons, it's also much more difficult to understand, and it's like not as common. It's a newer emerging strategy. So you're sticking to the core, and you're sticking to the people and the customer and that kind of stuff. And I think what makes it difficult for partnership teams to be involved is that you're not just doing sales, or you're just not doing marketing. You're not doing CSM or things like that. You're doing all of them to some extent, which means you don't bring as much to the table as somebody just doing sales or just doing marketing.
Yeah, it's not as clear exactly.
But you're blending in with all of them in some way, shape, or form, and you're already working with that stakeholder, preferably. So they should already know the partnership agenda in that topic. So you don't really if you've done your job well, you've aligned with the head of customer success, the marketing, sales, CEO. And you're doing 20% with each. So you don't really bring that much necessarily. So it's more from a visibility standpoint to be involved and to feel involved. But I think that's one of the complexities, that you're involved in so many different layers of the organizations, and you're not doing a specific standalone thing. Because it builds on the foundation of doing it with everybody else.
No, that makes perfect sense. I totally agree with you. And then I wanted to know more about, or just elaborate on this. It's not a direct question, but I feel like when you're mentioning the part that, hey, maybe this is not somebody that's naturally a part of the management team or so on, I feel like many roles can say that. But I think it's the most obvious, I would say. It's more obvious, I would say, with the partnerships, partnership managers. Like I would say a lot of CMOs also claim that, and a lot of product managers and, product CTOs and so on also can feel that, I think, sometimes. But I think it kind of boils down a little bit to, and this, I think, comes back to how much of the results you own, and like the goals that you're responsible for, and then how much who you report to and so on, right? So I want to understand a little bit more about this, if it's okay with you. Looking at partnerships at Teamtailor, I'm guessing you have a revenue target that you need to reach sometimes, or that's part of the goal.
Sometimes, not every month.
Not every time, right? Maybe this month, maybe not that month, not the next month. But and I'm guessing that there's also other metrics that are important to you, right? But eventually, when it comes down to it, are you reporting this to somebody, and who would that be?
In the revenue organization. So sales, marketing, and marketing is under the revenue organization, and that's where I report it to. That then goes up to the CEO.
Okay, so it's a chief revenue officer, basically.
Not officially, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just
that's the thing. We don't have the titles in that.
Okay. Screw the three letters combinations, but that's a typical.
It's the CRO.
Okay. And who else is reporting to that person? Not to name the 3-letter combinations, but is it you said sales,
partnerships, marketing, sales, customer success, customer support, all of the customer facing are under that
umbrella. Basically,
it's more. Actually, I think it's more like a COO that we report to. Since to be more accurate. And then under the CFO, we have HR, legal, finance, IT, security, and those things. So those are the core brackets of the organization.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I understand what you meant then by not being overly complicated, because it doesn't sound like you guys have 700 branches, which some companies tend to do.
No, and that's the thing. We have a team of customer-facing, customer-related things, and we have business support-related things, and these will talk to each other, and they will rendezvous with the managers of that stake. I want to emphasize, though, that it's super important that even if you're a partnership manager and you're not aligned with a management team, you don't have to be in it, but you need to be aligned, because otherwise you're not going to succeed, because you will never be able to do it on your own. I don't think it's important that you are part of the room as much, but you need to have the alignment with everybody in the room. Otherwise, you're going to have a really hard time.
Yeah, I love that. that you're emphasizing that, because I think that also correlates to many other different roles that sort of miss that key aspect. Let's jump into the category, and I know this is also, depending on how you want to look at it, right? But let's say I am a typical customer to Teamtailor, right? Or that fits into the sort of the customers that look most similar. Swedish company, for example. What do I call you if I don't call you by the name of Teamtailor? Like, what are you? Are you a CRM? Are you an ATS? Are you a HR tech company? Like, what's the typical sort of category from a buyer's perspective when they mention you?
I'd say the most common one that we hear customers say is recruitment software.
Yeah.
It's probably the easiest one because it's a pretty broad encompassing.
Yeah.
ATS is probably, but recruitment software, recruitment system is probably the most common one that people refer to us by.
How do you guys refer to yourselves? Like, what are you? When you say we're Teamtailor, we're a...
No, but I think we also do use recruitment software.
Okay.
And because we don't like the historical stigma too much about the historical ATSs, because they have been so old school and so old fashioned and that kind of stuff. We still have to, from like SEO standpoint and visibility, still have that as a portion of it, because you can't do too much about it, because there will be customers looking specifically for ATS, and we need to find those, or rather we want them to find us. Right. But we would like to be like an all-encompassing recruitment software that does recruitment marketing, employer branding, and recruitment. Yeah. So we prefer to use like the recruitment software.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for clearing that up, because we've been talking about it internally a lot, because as you know, recruitment software and ATS is a category on Business Wit. So we're like, okay, what is it actually specifically, as you said, for SEO purposes and for paid search purposes and so on. So thank you for that input. I'm going to use that. We've been covering a lot of the category specific questions that I had for you today, so we don't have to stay there for too long. But during the 7 years that you've been in this category, like, what are the major changes that you've seen from when you started up until today? Like, do you see any big changes that has happened?
Yeah, there's been a few. Yeah. Well, number one, GDPR was a big one for the HR tech space in general. We saw a biggest surgence of people actually becoming more modern and that kind of stuff. That happened in 2018, like just as we were starting to do things. We saw an initial trend of like separation of best of breeds. So everybody was doing best of breeds, just doing separate things. Okay. And we're now seeing like a trend of consolidation, where companies are coming together instead of that. And because before that, people were like these all-in-one solutions, and they broke out into being best of breeds. And now we're seeing the trend happening again in some sense, where companies are merging and they're building, like platforms are building adjacent products as well. So we're seeing that happen. Okay. And I'm guessing that's an endless cycle. I'm seeing a lot of companies work with partnerships, which is super exciting for me, which is a fun trend. I think we were seeing a lot of companies come to the realization and the awareness of candidate experience, which has been the best buzzword, and like same has been with employer branding. They've been buzzwords for a long time, but I think people are now starting to fully do it. I still hear horror stories of people trying to apply for jobs, and it's just like awful out there. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how great softwares you use and how well we've thought about it, unless the person behind it doesn't do the work, then you're not going to be able to get to that point. Yeah. And of course, now in the last couple of years, we've seen the AI surge and that kind of stuff as well. Yeah. But over my years, like specifically in the partnership space, I've been very exposed to the HR's recruiting space in general. Yeah. There's always been surges of like new companies popping up, and HR tech was super hot for a while, and everybody wanted to get into it. Yeah. And you saw like you were getting messages every single day, and then it just like died out. Yeah. And then it started up again, and then it died out. Yeah. And then you started seeing companies like the global hiring, remote hiring, equality, diversity. Right. There's so many good things that are happening because companies are becoming more aware that you need to be treating yourself as a human, and candidates as a human, and treat your employees right. Yeah. Which I think Swedish companies are really good at spearheading, because for us that's come natural. Yeah. And we're seeing the trend. We're like, America's now starting to realize that, hey, this is a good thing. And we're like, we know. We did this 15 years
maybe
ago.
It's good to give a mother who has just given birth a few weeks off. Maybe that's a good idea. Well, we're like, we've done doing that for
a long time.
For a long time, yeah.
But so I think it's also a difficult question, because of course trends, I'm looking at it from the global lens as well, which is like in Sweden, we see certain trends. and we're always generally ahead of the curve in a lot of things.
True.
But we're also behind on the curve in some things, like on tech-related things like AI and that kind of stuff that happened a year before it even came to Sweden.
Yeah, true.
When it comes to like employer branding, candidate experience, equality, diversity, and inclusion, that happened way sooner in Sweden than it happened in other places generally.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I agree with you. You've been mentioning AI, of course, and we can't sit here in 2024 not talking about it. I don't want to dig too deep into it, but I just want to understand, have you implemented any AI? Why did you do it? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think the why is pretty simple. It's a super exciting technology that can do so much, but you need to be careful about it. I think we're thinking about it from a very ethical standpoint, that it shouldn't take somebody's job and do some of those things. So the way we've built it is essentially like an assistant that helps you do the dull admin things that you don't want to do otherwise, or that it's just difficult to do. So it's like if you're writing questions for an interview or setting up interview questions or a framework for what skills and personality traits you should assess this candidate, or writing the job descriptions, it helps you that. And AI at this point has gotten pretty good at that by taking some of those things, but it doesn't help you like screen and automatically do things and like that. So you can just like let go of the wheel. We still want the people hiring in Teamtailor to hold the wheel, but they'll have somebody else that can help put it on cruise control and help do some of those things to make your job more efficient.
Right. And then I understand that perspective, of course. And I mean, AI seems to be one of those things that people are not thinking, should I do it? It's more like, when can I do it? And like, I need to incorporate AI into like my strategy, rather than if you look at, I don't know, say marketing, for example, like when digital marketing started getting big, or like when marketing automation started getting big, or, content marketing was big. People were like, maybe I'll approach it. And I'm not saying that content marketing is such a revolving thing as AI is, right? But I want to understand, like, for example, you mentioned a few things that you've incorporated into Teamtailor, like the mundane things as administration, for example, which typically tends to be the first things that you look at, right?
Yep.
How do you see, and I know you're not a product manager here, but I'm sure you have some insights to this. What are some of the things that you've implemented that have been appreciated by users, AI-wise, and maybe some things that you thought was going to be huge and didn't really take off?
So we launched the AI feature as a bundled co-pilot.
Okay.
So it's like this virtual assistant that helps you do mundane admin tasks. And so far, most of it has been really, really appreciated.
Okay. Yeah.
So most of it has been really, because it helps you do the things you don't want to do either way, and it does it really well because it's gotten to that point. So you don't need to take notes during interviews. It helps you do all of the mundane tasks.
Also, it records basically what the conversation is about.
And transcribes the conversation and summarizes it for you and helps you suggest some of those things. But you're still the person taking the action. So it doesn't, for people using the AI features in Teamtailor, it's one of those things that you can do more with less time, and you don't have to do the dull, boring things. So generally, the feedback has been really, really good. Of course, there's certain people like, well, this wasn't spelled right.
Yeah.
But that's like part of the evolution, and it's not the common feedback that we're getting, because it is, you're still in full control.
Right.
It's also, we've launched it in a way where it's not everywhere all at once. Like, if you want to have it here, do it there. If you want to add it there, you can do it there. If you want to do it there, if you want to do it everywhere, do that.
Yeah.
So it's still remained like, the control has been a really important way of how we do it from an ethical standpoint as well, and from the control standpoint. So we don't just say, hey, AI will do everything for you, but it can help you if you want it to, and you will need to tell them that that you want it to help you.
Right. Okay. Got you. Are you working with like you got a team internally specifically focusing on AI, or how are you approaching it?
So I think that comes down to the way we develop the product. But there are people who are more curious about the AI, the features and that kind of stuff. But we have dedicated teams who work specifically on like analytics and candidate experience and the product health and like DevOps and things like that. But and AI will always be something they're looking at, but there's not like a dedicated AI team that's only will only do AI.
Because you keep seeing this now, like, oh, we just did this AI team now, and they're only focusing on AI. I heard like a newspaper were like, oh, we have teams that are spending I don't know, 40 to 60 hours every month just looking at AI, for example.
Yeah. But I think the important thing to distinguish there is the way we build the product at Teamtailor allows us to be like, okay, AI is really big this week. We can put 3 teams on doing AI that quarter. So we develop the product in 8-week cycles, where 6 weeks are development. 1 week is like innovation week, which is like hackathons for a week for the developers, and then a week for improvement to squash bugs. And then in between those like improvement and innovation weeks, the product managers are shaping new products and pitching ideas, which is half from the products team and like what ideas they have is from the customers and the team and that kind of stuff to be these are the things we want to do, which ones are realistic that we can build in this 6 weeks that we're building something. So certain cycles we might, and these like the development team is always built up where there's always 2 developers and a designer. And they will take on certain projects, and sometimes it will take all of the 6 weeks, sometimes it will take 2 weeks, and they will do 3 batches under these 6 weeks. But if AI is like, hey, we really want to do something, we can put 5 teams of AI people theoretically on doing AI. But if we've done something, we're really happy about it, the same person who just did AI for 6 weeks can now do something else. But generally, we also have people who are really, really keen on it and want to continue exploring and developing it as well.
Okay, so basically, it's more of a you're already thinking about innovation, and then AI is just a part of thinking about innovative things to incorporate. Basically,
we tend to say that 50% of our product development roadmap is all the way innovation. So 50% is core, which is what we say is like customer feedback and employee feedback. 50% is innovation, looking at what's being done in industries and what can we do that is different. So AI is just another part of the innovation scope. Of course, we want to see the trends, but we're not just doing headfirst AI because everybody's doing AI.
That's what I keep hearing. And my personal thought on it is, of course, it's something you cannot just forget about, and you can't be like, no, that's just something that's going to be, I don't know, like a famous politician said about the internet, like it's just a fly. And I'm sure it's not. But at the same time, I also feel like there's a certain stress about it. Like companies are feeling a little bit stressed about it, wants to incorporate AI without actually knowing what they're going to use it for, just by, they want to be saying that, hey, I'm using AI, I've incorporated AI, rather than looking at it from the perspective that you do. How can I actually innovate, and how can I make my product better with possibly the help of AI? Because AI is not always the answer to innovation. You know what I mean? And I like the way you guys have that approach to it. And I think it's really interesting to hear companies actually going about it in a mindful way, as opposed to coming from a perspective where, you're driven by fear of missing out, for example. Because that's what I keep seeing the most, basically.
Well, I think that comes down to everything in business. If you're always forced to be reactive and never the first one who can help push the needle, and you're always trying to play catch up, you're never going to be in that position. And that comes down to, like, we have so many success stories of like companies. Like, I know there's so many cases where like, okay, Apple launched the iPhone, Microsoft needs to catch up and create a phone. They spent 5 years trying to do the phone space, and they just drop it because they had to do catch up, and they couldn't be the one like paving the way. And I think it is a fear that a lot of companies are just like, we need to add AI to everything because AI is cool and it sells, and investors are investing into AI. And so everybody should just do AI, but they're not thinking about, okay, what I'm actually trying to solve, and what is and I think that's the core principle of everything. And I think also one of the key principles that has made Teamtailor successful, despite any trend, any of that kind of stuff, we've always stuck to like our beliefs. Okay, we have a lot of customers saying a lot of these things. We might believe that that's the thing we should do or not. We're always looking at how do we shape and build the product into a better version every single week.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Let's talk about buying. I mean, buying Teamtailor, buying into the category, right? And I want to split this up into 2 parts. First, what do you think is some of the misconceptions about buying into the ATS, or the recruitment software space as a buyer?
Misconceptions about buying into the space.
Buying Teamtailor, like maybe you have an assumption of what this is because you've received signals of what this is, or you hear somebody talking about it, and then you think that, hey, this is exactly the solution to my problem, and maybe it's not. I don't know.
I think that actually covers it quite. Like, I think that's one of the most common misconceptions we generally see, and I think is that it's the magic all-in-one solution that helps you solve all of your problems. It can be if you're doing it well, but also you need to see it as it is a toolkit. If you're a completely inept carpenter and will start using the hammer as a saw, it doesn't matter how great your tools are. you will still not build a robust house.
Sure.
So I think a lot of people and the way they're like being sold to it historically. So ATS and the recruitment space has been around for as long as internet has been around. As long as you could apply online, there's been some kind of ATS.
Sure.
People are used to them being bulky and boring, and salespeople selling and saying it's the magic fix and the magic solution.
Right.
So it comes with preconceptions about that as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that when you're buying into the industry, you need to be aware of what you actually want, what you actually need.
Yeah.
Because there's there's a lot of things that are great, but you might not need all of that, and you might not need some of that. And I think it comes down to anything that you do. You need to be conscious about the ideas and not just see it as like tech will not solve your problems unless you're willing to do the extra work as well.
True.
So, but I think a misconception there is like it's oftentimes difficult to implement. It's expensive and it's doesn't give you results.
Right.
But that's the same way could be seen around, because that usually means that you're just seeing it from one perspective.
Of course.
If you were to buy something and never buy a car, never use it, and be like, hey, it doesn't take me anywhere. Well, obviously it doesn't take you anywhere. It's a really expensive, bad purchase then.
Yeah.
But if you're driving it every single day and you're getting joy out of it, it's not going to be as expensive.
True.
And the same thing goes with implementation. If you're starting to look from it from the wrong angle, or you're not getting help, or you don't know what you're actually getting yourself into, so you buy the biggest, brandest, coolest thing in the space because you think it's good to have the biggest one, that might not be the right case.
Right.
So I think focus on something that your team and you can manage, and something you will actually use, and understanding how will you use it. I think those are the key things, because otherwise you'll fall into those pits where you buy something that's going to be expensive, you're not going to get the value out of it, and it's not going to help you solve your problems, because you need to do the stuff first.
Yeah, that makes sense. You actually kind of answered the second part of this question, so I'm not going to repeat that, but that was more centered around what to think about when buying into the space. But you beautifully covered that as well.
Not my first rodeo.
You've been around for a few years.
Exactly.
I actually have the last questions for you, and this is one thing that I know you'll be able to answer easily. One thing you can choose if you want to answer this. You've talked about it publicly. That's why I'm asking about it. I would never ask it otherwise. The first thing is you've announced publicly that you are, I don't remember, stepping down, moving to the side, moving up, leaving. I don't know. You were a little bit, you weren't as transparent on that. Can you talk about it? Like, what made you post that? Like, what are you thinking about Teamtailor? But like, what's in it for you in the future?
Yeah, I think this was one of those things that might have come to us as shock, and it's one of those things that has nothing to do with Teamtailor and what I do right now. It's more about me preparing, in a sense. I love this thing, and I think Teamtailor is an amazing thing. But I've noticed an opportunity where I have a side project that is going quite well.
Yeah.
And an avenue might open up, and I've worked with blood, sweat, and tears for 7 years to get us and myself to this point.
Yeah.
And I don't want to let all that burn, because I might be chasing something further down the line.
Right.
So my decision to do something is, it might not even lead to anything. It might just be me looking for a replacement for myself. This side project going down in flames before it even takes off the ground.
Yeah.
And I'll stay around the Teamtailor. But I want to make sure that I can take that avenue without me hurting everything that I've built up in the past.
Okay.
So if that means that, for me, it's more important to find the right stakeholder, to find the right person. And there's no saying that I will even leave Teamtailor.
Okay.
So it's not an easy question to answer, in that sense that I want to do the best thing, because I see a path that I might want to take.
Right.
And I can't do that in my current position. I can't eat the cake and have it too.
Okay.
So if that doesn't work out, I might still be a Teamtailor doing different roles in the same role in a year from now, but I will spend as much time finding the right replacement to make sure that my legacy, in a sense, can carry on, even if I wasn't to be there.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So I'm hearing you have something going on the side that you're obviously passionate about, and you want to explore that more. But you're also very very careful into not ruining it, the things that you have sort of built throughout the years. And man, this must be one of the hardest recruitments that maybe you've ever done. If it comes to that point that you actually replace yourself.
But that's also why I wanted to do it. Yeah. For me, like this thing has it's been a thought for a while. I've always dreamed of potentially pursuing it, but I don't know if it's even going to happen. Yeah. But I need it to be as proactive as possible, and I'm ready for it to take 6, 12 months or even more to find the right person.
Right.
Because that's more important to me to continue the legacy. And it also allows me to make sure that I can continue, or if that comes to helping somebody in the team or whatever. Like there's so many different paths.
Yeah, true. Well, I'm not going to dig deeper into that now. Maybe I'll ask you when the microphones are off, but I totally understand that. So I just saw it, and I was like, interesting. What is he going to do now? Of course, is he stepping down? Is he moving up? Is he, starting something else? So thank you for sharing that either way. But I'm curious to know more about that, of course.
Yeah, of course. It's, I can share some stuff in general. It's about the partnership space.
Yeah.
I think it's, I've been grown and fostered into the space. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't think the technology is right for the ICP and the partnership managers.
Yeah.
All of the platforms that exist out there, frankly, suck. Being a very, there are a few good platforms, but the ones for me and my use case and what I'm trying to do, no platform suits my needs.
Okay.
And they're built for a different type of doing partnerships. They're great if you're Toyota trying to sell, manage your resellers who are selling your cars in dealerships.
Yeah.
But it's not great for two companies collaborating, doing things together and trying to do something strategically on a far-sighted perspective. And so that's what I'm trying to explore.
Love it. I love it. And I love that you're doing something that you have such, deep-rooted skills in, and I think those are the best inventions when you come from the problem or the sort of opportunity and you want to better a space.
Yeah.
And very interesting,
We'll
man.
do this again in 2 years and see if it worked out or not.
I'm interested to hear more about that, man. And whatever you do and however it goes, I wish you the best of success with that.
Thanks, man.
The last question I have for you, man, is something I ask every guest here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what we do here now. You've been a part of this experience. Who would you recommend me talking to if I want to do this with the next guest? Who would be a good fit for this show, for this talk? Who comes to your mind?
Frida Arenby.
Yeah.
CMO Get Accept. I hope she's still there. She's one of those people in the SaaS industry, in the marketing space, that's done really, 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 really well for herself.
Yeah.
Let's see. There are so many good people, but you can never think of them at the top.
No, I actually only need one. Yeah. So you're good to go.
No,
you're
Frida,
good to go.
She comes here.
Thank you so much. Fredrik, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to thank you for being so open with all of your learnings, your challenges. Just spreading all of that learnings, I think, is one part of why we do this, So I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and coming here.
Thanks for having me. I had a blast.
Nice, man. Appreciate it.
Good stuff.